Hello again, students. This is just a quick tutorial on how to use Academic Search Complete. The parallel database, if you're accessing these through the New York Public Library, is Academic Search Premier. They are more or less the same database, though. It's a slightly different catalog that you have access to as a result. So the way that databases work in sort of like academic libraries is that they're largely grouped based on subject matter and the person that owns the content. In this case, these records are owned by a multinational corporation called EBSCOhost. So EBSCOhost has a pretty wide variety of material available to it, and as a result, I really recommend this database as just a way to dive into the basics of library research. So right away you'll see that we have a pretty straightforward search bar up here and a number of search terms down here that I'm going to go over with you really quickly in a second. I'm going to show you what not to do. So students are tempted to use this a lot like they use Google, and as a result they can end up getting some pretty unhelpful sources like these. As you can see, just typing in just the term gun control, I get a host of different results that range pretty dramatically in terms of their reliability, their currency, and the level of academic clout that they present. But if I start using some of these limiters on the side, I can actually dramatically influence the way that my sources kind of turn out. So a lot of the stuff that I have coming up here, as you can see, is videos that I don't really have a lot of context for because they are mostly popular videos that are sort of interspersed with academic articles. But if I click on scholarly or peer-reviewed journals, suddenly, as you can see, I have far fewer results here. And if I click on full text, that count will go down a little bit more. Now, a general search like gun control isn't great still. You don't want to generally do that if you can get away with it. But clicking on some of these limiters over here can really help you just pare down your results and make sure that you're only looking at results that kind of fit the bill of what you're looking for. And as you can see, magazines, book reviews, academic journals, these are fairly self-explanatory terms, but usually what you want to look for when you're trying to locate that scholarly source that you need for your research paper is an academic journal article. So let's talk about how to do that, since obviously typing the word gun control into the search bar of a search engine isn't how you're supposed to do so. So if we click on the advanced search tag, you'll see that we can introduce a multitude of search terms that we can sort of look through the database for all at the same time. And the way that those search terms are associated with one another is by using Boolean operands. So Boolean operands are basically like really simple terms and or not that illustrate the relationship between your different search terms. For instance, if I were to do gun control, not Japan, right, and United States, I would be looking for every article that does not reference Japan when they talk about gun control. Or let's do something more pertinent for you guys. Not Australia and the United States. I'd be looking for every article that references Australia or does not reference Australia and does reference the United States. This can be a really useful way to cut out unhelpful results. For instance, if you're actually looking at criminal justice reform and you don't type in United States, you will end up getting articles about a host of different places. So let's do a quick demonstration. So if we type in criminal justice reform and we don't actually include any kind of modifiers, we will get just a wide variety of articles that could be about the United States, or they could be about, as you can see, Russia. South Africa shows up frequently when people talk about police brutality for some reason. Probably because, they had a really, really brutal police system for a long time. But if we limit our search terms by adding things like United States in there, we'll only be looking at articles that discuss the context that we are interested in discussing. And what I'd really, really recommend is using even more specialized search terms. Like, for instance, in this case, I'll say bail reform, because bail reform is one of those hot topics that I kind of hinted at, where people are talking about how they want to shift the way the criminal justice system works. And in New York, this is especially pertinent. It can sometimes take up to 3 years for you to get a trial after you've been accused of a crime. And if you don't have the ability to post bail during that time, that means that you can spend 3 years in prison while waiting to be tried for a crime you may not have committed. Um, New York has some serious problems, and bail reform is kind of one of the ways that people are thinking about approaching those problems. So if I use that as a specialized term, that can be helpful. I can also I can add additional search terms by clicking on this plus and minus thing down here. And yeah, that's kind of how you want to try and limit these sources. I also always recommend clicking full text when you're searching for material, even if you don't click the scholarly peer-reviewed limiter, because full text will limit the set of sources that are returned to you just on the basis of what you can actually read in their entirety. I know it might seem weird, but the library databases will often give you access or give return records to searches that you can't actually access right away. So, yeah, click full text and you won't get any false positives. Click scholarly and you'll only get scholarly sources. And then the last thing I want to point out is over here, you'll see that we can choose from different publication types if we want to. You can also do the same over here to some extent. And what's really cool is you can also just limit the time period that you're looking at. So I'm actually going to look only at articles from the last 20 years. And yeah, let's do a search. No results were found. I might have been too picky. All right, I'm going to get rid of New York City. Let's see if we got anything. Okay, 2 articles. Now, this might seem like it's not great because we've only got 2 articles, but here's the thing. These articles are really, really focused, and as you can see, they are about the topic that I'm interested in learning more about and discussing. And sometimes, as you can see, it'll point you in directions that you wouldn't have expected. The New Jersey approach, that's not something I would jump to when I talk about criminal justice reform and fairness. I don't have that association in my brain, but apparently this person who studies this subject does. And as a result, this could be an awesome article that could really, really help me with my paper. So if we look through this, you'll see that this article is fairly short. It's only 1,200 words. That's about the length of your second response paper, what it's supposed to be. So like, not that this won't take you that long to read. It might not be a very in-depth article, but it might actually give you a strong sense of how people are talking about this issue. The abstract here essentially summarizes the article, so by reading it, you get a sense of what the article's overarching purpose is. And let's click the HTML full record. Hey, we got it. So you get a kind of plain text dump of the article here that normally will be substantially longer. Let's see just how long this guy goes. Yeah, so if we look at a PDF full text of this article, this is more representative of what you'll normally see. This PDF is about 30 pages long. So, oh no, it's 80 pages long. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend using an article this long. Usually you want to look for things that are between 8 and 20 pages long, but these sources might be useful for you in one way or the other, and sometimes you'll actually end up finding like weirdly great source material that you just wouldn't expect to actually find in these circumstances. Like if you look at where my cursor is, the impact of pretrial risk assessment in Kentucky might sound like gobbledygook, but if you know about pretrial risk assessment and its impact on bail reform, then you know that that actually could represent a case study that you would want to investigate in your paper. Even though Kentucky might not seem like a very progressive place, it sounds like they're actually trying to do some work in reforming bail that might have implications for a place like New York City, where bail represents such a substantial problem. So, yeah, even an article like this, where the bulk of the article might not be something you want to end up reading, or an article like this, where it might be too short to be practically useful in your paper, they can still help you develop an understanding of the topic and maybe end up filling in a hole in your paper that you didn't know you really needed. So, just to review, when you are looking at Academic Search Complete, I recommend using the advanced search tools, limiting your search to full text and scholarly articles. When pertinent, you want to mess with the published date stuff to make sure you're getting records that are relevant to your topic of study. And I recommend using multiple search terms. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about sort of fiddling with search terms, where you sort of move them around and mess with them. So before, I believe my search terms were criminal justice reform, bail reform, and United States. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to use this variable approach where multiple terms will be used. I'm going to use bail reform. Instead of bail reform, I'll just use bail, and I'm just going to do criminal justice. And as you can see, I get a substantially larger set of results, even though I'm still limiting myself to full text and scholarly peer-reviewed articles. And if I take it from, let's move it up from 1907 to like 1972. Yeah, so they're eliminating about a century. I still have 61 fresh hits, and some of these are probably going to be a lot more useful for you. This 18-page article, for instance, looks like it is like a perfect academic article for the purposes of a paper like ours. Again, I don't recommend reading the entirety of articles like this one before you really start your research process. What I really recommend you do is you read the abstract and see if the abstract of this article represents something you're interested in after you've done a little bit of, background research through more public-facing resources like Google and like Wikipedia. These resources are really here to help you write your paper and offer you expert opinions that you can use to engage in a conversation on your subject. All right. I hope this helped you guys out and that it wasn't too long. And I'm going to try and do at least one more database before I go to bed tonight. Have a great night, and you'll see a bunch more videos from me in the coming days.